Thank you for coming back. What we're going to do today is go through the basics of how the pieces move. We're going to start with a pawn. Okay, you've got 8 of these, and these are foot soldiers. This is how they're originally set up on both sides. You've got 8 of them, and they always go always forward, never back. Okay, so what nice, they go 1, 2, one at a time, right, all the way across. Now, what we did do is we called this their home, where they're starting right here. And from their home, they can actually go 2 squares if they want to for their first move. I can go 1, or I could go 2, or I could go 2, or I could go 1. But once you've left home forevermore, it's only 1 at a time. Okay? So you kind of got that. Now, what's also interesting about the pawns is that when they're in front of each other, guess what? They only attack diagonally. This white one going that way and the black pawn going that way, right? So when they're here, I just like to say that they're visiting. Hello, how are you? It's a lovely day. They can't do anything at all. Now, if my pawn is here, let's say the white pawn is here, and if it's my move, I capture by going diagonal and taking a piece. If it's black's move, they could capture me this way. And what we like about this is we say we like to build what we call pawn chains, right? Because this pawn is protected by this pawn, which is protected by this pawn. Okay, so that's basically how they move and how they capture. And we're going to go on to a more complicated piece, a special rule with pawns. And we're going to come back to that. We have 2 special rules with pawns. Special rule number 1 with pawns. They are the foot soldiers. And what is very, very exciting about them is if they get all the way to the other side of the board, they get to actually change. When they get to the other end of the board, they can change into something else. They can turn into a queen. We just take it off, and then the queen goes there. Or we could turn it into a rook, or we could turn it into a bishop, or we could turn it into a knight, right? So any one of those pieces, any one of those 4 pieces. So if you work hard enough, long enough, and survive long enough, you get to the other end of the board, you can change the world. And it's really, really exciting. So that's a really cool thing about the pawns. Now, interesting, as you may recall, we start with 1 queen on the board. So the question to you is, how many potential queens could you have? A lot of people say 8. You're right, because we could get 8 different queens, but you're already starting with 1. So theoretically, you could actually have 9 queens on the board. Kind of ridiculous. The most I've ever seen is 3. I did have one person get 4, just trying to get more of them. But so you can have more than 1 queen, and that's pretty exciting too. The second special rule for pawns. Let's say I'm not 1, 2, I'm 3 squares up. Okay, and my opponent, I'm going to take these other pawns off the board so we don't get too confused with this, right? I'm going to pull these over to the side, okay? So if my opponent moves their pawn up 2 squares, it's as though they're moving here and then there, okay? Remember that when we talked about the pawn, when the pawn, it used to only go 1 square, and then they changed the rules so that it could go 2 squares. So what happens, if they pass me up, I can actually go here and take the pawn. That seems crazy. But the reason the rule came out is because they said, look, if I worked so hard to get this far down the board, you shouldn't be able to just run past me. I should have an opportunity to capture the piece. It's called en passant for French. It means in passing. Now, when the opponent makes that move, I only have 1 chance to do it. I can't say, oh, I'll do it later. I have to do it immediately. Either I do it or I don't. I can't change it later. But I would go there and I'd capture the piece. It's a rare thing, but it is important for you to know. All right, any questions? Just let me know. All right, let's start with the king. This is the king. And usually what you're looking for, just like back here, whoopsie, I got it, right? He usually has a little cross on top of his head, okay? So look for that piece. It goes on its opposite color, okay? So the light king goes on the dark square, and the dark king goes on the light square, okay? They face each other. when we do the pawns, we're going to put all the pawns up here so you see that. See, this is the normal configuration, right? You have all of the pawns and you have the king. Now, there you go. You got that. Now, what I want you to show you the king is the king moves one square in any direction. Here, 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 here. One square in any direction. Now, the kings cannot touch each other because it would be considered an illegal move. I cannot deliberately put my king in danger. And that's what would be happening if it went right next to each other, right? So the kings never touch each other, but they move one square in any direction. They're the weakest piece on the board, but as we talked about earlier, they are the most important piece, okay? So this is how they start off. A lot of times what we'll do with the pawns is we'll play what we call farmer's chess, and you'll start here with no other pieces, and you're trying to get a pawn to the other end of the board. First one wins the game. But the kings, one square in any direction. Any questions? Then let me know. Now we're going to talk about the bishop. This is the bishop, and the bishop stands on either side of the king and the queen, okay? This is their third square in on either side. You have two bishops. One is on a light square and one is on a dark square. That's important to you because the bishops move diagonally as far as they can go, as long as nothing gets in their way, right? As long as nothing gets in their way. Now, as you recall, we have 64 squares. So a single bishop, if I just have my light squared bishop, it can only hit half the board, only the light squares. So only 32 squares. Although it moves really fast, if you've only got one of them, it can be a little bit of a problem, okay? This is where they sit, your light bishop and your dark bishop. And then we'll put the pawns up just so you see how, again, that configuration as we get to building our board. And then where the king, because we want to remember where the kings always go, on their opposite color. And this is where the bishops go. Now, we did talk about the moving diagonally, and they can't jump over pieces. So guess what? Our bishops in the beginning are trapped. They can't go anywhere. So what we want to do is make an opening so that the bishop can come out, right? So I'll give you an example. If I went here, now this bishop can come out. If my opponent moved a pawn here, not a great move because we want to control the center, but just to show you how this works, this bishop can come out and it can capture whatever it lands on, okay? So we could do something like that. Now, if I move my bishop to there, black, then because remember the way the pawns move, he could capture him, right? Now, let's say even further example. If my bishop is here, that pawn can't go 2 squares, can only capture things on its immediate diagonal, whereas the bishop can go a long, long way. So that's how the bishops work. This is why we normally like to have these pawns out so our bishops can get in the game and be very active. Any questions on the bishop? Just let me know. Really cool piece, fast moving, considered a minor piece. Okay, very good. Thanks. All right, now we're going to talk about the rook, okay? Sometimes called a castle, a rook. In some countries, they might even call it a tower, okay? And what's great about these is they go up and down, sideways, horizontal and vertical, as far as they want to go or as far as they can go. They capture, as you may see, I just captured that rook, and this rook can come over here and capture him, or if it wanted to, it could come over and capture him. So they can go as far as they want to, but they cannot jump over pieces. To practice individual pieces, what I really like to do is set it up like this. Have the kings, in this case, we're using rooks, right? We want the rooks to play out. And we play again the farmer's chess, or I might give you another name for it a little bit later. But farmer's chess, we're just trying to get a pawn to the other end of the board. First one to get a pawn to the other end of the board wins the game. This is just practice, but your best players in the world, masters and even grandmasters, will practice this weekly to help focus on individual pieces. Okay? Any questions of the rook? Let me know. Now we're going to talk about the queen. The queen is the most powerful piece on the board. It can move like a rook, side to side and up as as far as it wants to go. But also, it can move diagonally. How cool is that? It can even change colors. And then its next move, diagonally in the dark squares, or it could change colors. And then its next turn, it could move diagonally on the light squares. So every piece of the board, it is the single most powerful piece you've got. So the queen is wonderful. She always starts on her color, the light queen on a light color and the dark queen on the dark color. So now you see in this configuration, we have the king and the queen at their designated locations, queen on her color, king right next to it, queen on her color, king right next to it. That's good. And we have all of the pawns. Okay. And this is a great way to practice with your queen as well. So you're trying to, in this version of Farmer's Chess, is we're just trying to get a pawn at the other end of the board. A great way to train. Okay, we've got one more piece to show you, and it is one of my absolute favorite pieces. Now we're going to talk about the knights. The knights are fantastic. I love these pieces. They're the only pieces that can jump over other pieces, so you can't block them at all. They just keep moving. Now, what is interesting about them is a lot of times you may read in a book or have somebody tell you it moves kind of like an L shape, right? Okay, something like that. But what I want you to do is remember, see if you remember, how many pawns do you have? 8, as you may recall. And what I think, I want you to always think of the knight as moving like a starburst. Look at that. You have 8 pawns, and a knight, not on the edge, can hit 8 positions. So if you visualize that entire starburst moving with it, very, very powerful. But when you think about it, let's think about this a minute. If I'm over on the side, okay, it moves only to here. Only 4 squares rather than 8. Or even worse, in a corner, it only has 2. So we say a knight on the rim is dim. Not that it's not smart, but it's not as powerful. So we want to keep the knights toward the center as much as you can. So we go, I like to think of it as going one direction, north, south, east, or west, just like a horizontal or vertical, and then the next one go diagonal to wherever you want. So I like to think of it, and most of my students were most productive with being, it's a 2 move. Many will do 3, but we're just going to say it's a 2 move, okay? One north, south, east, or west, and then a diagonal to the others. Another very interesting thing about the knight, and you may have already noticed, I'm starting on a dark square. But when I move over here to a light square, now I've changed, right? I moved to a light square, and now I'm able to hit all of those dark squares. So this is a difference between a bishop and a knight. Bishops, as you may recall, are stuck on 32 squares, only half of the board. They move very fast, but again, it is only half the board. Whereas the knight, if it has enough time, it can hit every single square. That becomes really important to you in the end game when we're trying to get a pawn to the other end of the board. Now, how do they capture? Well, let's talk about that for a moment. So we see that a knight in its original position, right? This is where they start. 1 square in from the edges, keeping the king and the queen in the center when we have all of the other pieces here. So your first move, it can't move here because you can't capture your own piece, right? But the knight can go here or here. And one of the questions to you is, which one do you think is better? Here or here? And if you think about it a little bit, we like this much more. Why? Because the knight can now hit the 8 squares that it wants to. I'm going to move the pawns again to kind of show where it can hit. I'm going to take that king away, right? So we would say it controls those 8 squares. Pretty cool, right? But if we move the knight over here to begin with, it's only covering 4. So it's not very active. So what we want to think about, especially in the beginning of the game, the knights come toward the center. There will be exceptions to rules, but for the most part, you always want to think of your knights coming toward the center to to help your game out a little bit more. This is a fun way to play farmer's chess as well, just with the knights and trying to get your pawn to the other end of the board. One other interesting thing here. Let's say we've got that. Say we've even got that. Wow, we've really buried that pawn. But this knight can jump over all of these pieces to capture that pawn. Okay, it can jump right over. We could capture this pawn here. Probably don't want to because the pawn would then take our knight. Okay, now we have all of the pieces at their correct home. Okay, they're all ready to go and very anxious to play. You're the coach, and remember that what you want to do is make sure you develop. Where's the worst place to be if you're on any team? Soccer, basketball, football. Of course, the worst place is on the bench. So you're the coach. All your players are screaming to you, just let me get in the game, coach. Let me get out there. So this is how we start, okay? So what we want to do is we want to move the pawns out, 2 squares. You're trying to control the center and you control the game. But before we get into the game too much, we do want to talk about the point value, okay? We don't actually keep a score, but it helps you keep an idea of how the game is going, okay? So we base everything off of a pawn. A pawn is 1 point. It's a single point, okay? Now, the next powerful piece would be considered our bishops that move on the diagonals or our knights that move in that interesting starburst shape, right? So our bishops and our knights are worth 3 points. 3 points each, or if my European friends would say 3 points like that. So pawns are worth 1, knights and bishops are worth 3, okay? And our rooks, because think how powerful they are. They go really far, don't they? They cover a lot of space, a lot of areas, especially later in the game. They become more and more powerful as the game progresses. So rooks are worth 5. Knights and bishops are considered minor pieces. So we think about getting our minor pieces early in the game. Major pieces are your rooks and your queen. So we said pawns are worth 1. Knights and bishops are worth 3 each, right? So to trade a knight for a bishop is fine, right? Rooks are worth 5. And, 5. I don't want to make it 10, right? And the queen, wow, that queen is so powerful. She's fantastic. So queen is actually worth 9 points. Almost as much as 2 rooks. That's how powerful she is. Very good. Now, occasionally someone will say, well, how much is a king worth? Well, king has no value because with no king, no game, right? So, but we can talk about some late in games where you might want to think about the value of the king. All right. So that gives you the point value and an introduction to how the pieces move. If you have any questions, just feel free to put it in the comments.